In today's tutorial, I'm going to be arranging homegrown gourds in a gorgeous autumn arrangement. Come and join me and see what I can create. Well, welcome back to another tutorial. Now, I've been inspired by the autumn colours that we're seeing around and about at the moment, all those lovely reds and browns that we're seeing in the trees as we head into the autumn. And I've got a gorgeous selection of reds and browns that are really going to complement the wood of my container. Now, you'll see by the overhead camera that I've got just a bit shy of a full block of foam, and I've sat it flush with my container. Now, that's an indication that it would be very difficult for me to come out to the side to create any horizontal placements because I don't have any height in the foam. But it's also going to give me the ability to sit my two little gourds on top of my floral foam like so. Now, under normal circumstances, I would place a wire or a kebab stick into the flesh of the pumpkin so that it's secure on the foam. But because I want to keep these for a few weeks to use in different lessons, different classes I've got here in the studio, I don't want to pierce the skin because that means it's going to rot much quicker. So for today's lesson, I'm just going to sit these on the edge. But if you're doing this design for a gift for somebody, if you're in a shop and you're doing it for commercial purposes, or you're arranging for the church and you don't want these to move around, then use a kebab stick or a cocktail stick, a strong florist wire, insert it into the bottom and then into the foam, and they're not going to move around. But the idea is that these are going to sit to one side of my floral design. I'm aiming for this to be unbalanced and asymmetrical, and I'm going to group the flowers together for a little bit of a more contemporary feel rather than evenly spread them out. I'm really proud to say that I've grown these in the garden along with a few different varieties. I've grown them from seed. They were really easy to do, and I'm planning on having another go next year to see what other varieties I can grow. It's quite trendy at the moment to grow novelty gourds because you see them all over social media, and lots of people grow them up and around an archway in the garden. And that's hopefully my plan for next year. So I might have to remove these every now and again if I need to get some foliage in from underneath, but that's the sort of style and the shape that I'm going for. Now, my foam is really secure and wedged into the container. It's not moving about anywhere, so I'm not going to add any tape. And I'm going to start by adding in some of these lovely grasses. Now, this is probably a miscanthus grass. I'll have to check back on my invoice and I can add it to the screen if I've got the variety name wrong. But they're a lovely lightweight grass. It's normally green, natural, but these have been sprayed copper. And I'm sort of starting to collect a few little items that are going to dry off in time for me to use them for Christmas workshops. And if you've ever wanted to know how to make a Christmas wreath, then pop over to the website because I've got a downloadable course that you can download to your laptop, your computer. It's got a video embedded into it so that you can watch a tutorial on how to create a gorgeous Christmas wreath. I'm making the most of the autumn colourings at the moment and just grouping some of this lovely little lightweight grass at the back to create some height. Also from the garden is this lovely foliage. Can I remember the name? No, I can't, but I'll also add that to the screen as well. This one I bought as a little shrub from a garden centre a good few years ago. It's been very slow growing, but it is now finally starting to take shape, and I'm able to start cutting from it. It's a nice woody stem, so I need to cut it at an angle to get into the foam. I'm just going to start by grouping the different types of materials together. If you don't have access to any garden foliage, then think of buying something from a florist shop. Buy a couple of houseplants. Go out and have a little forage around and see what you can find. But I'm aiming to group the materials together. That gives me a bit more of a modern touch rather than spreading everything out really equal on both sides of a centre line. So from the garden is a plant that I'm very familiar with. This is Physocarpus Diablo, and it's a gorgeous one for the garden. It's really rich red. This is just sort of starting to die back now as we head into the autumn, and I thought I'd make the most of it now before it drops all its leaves. And just And that's what happens when you don't secure your accessories to your foam. And that might happen more than once through this video. So the Physocarpus Diablo, I don't know if it's got a common name. I might sound a bit of a smart ass by naming it by its botanical name, but I'm not familiar of its common name. It's being clustered together on the opposite side. I'm not really looking to create any particular outline shape, so no traditional triangles or L shapes. It's just going to be an arrangement where the emphasis is on all this lovely textural material. To keep it in proportion with the quite heavy base, I've gone about twice the width of my container. So if you can imagine the width of your container on the side twice, that's roughly how tall I want to go. I don't want to go too short, otherwise it's going to be a bit squat and out of proportion. And in the front section here, I've mentioned that I don't have foam raised up enough to give any side placements, but what I can do is use the lovely ivy, which has grown a little bit at a curve, and that will give me the ability to just drape it down over the front of the container there and make a really nice neat edge. If you don't have anything that's trailing, so if you haven't got any ivy or clematis vine or anything like that, you might want to consider raising your foam up in the middle. But always bear in mind that the more foam you've got, the more flowers, foliage, greenery you have to use to cover it. I'm quite lucky because I live in an area where there's lots of greenery that I can forage for if I'm not taking a huge amount of it. And I've also got plenty of stuff in the garden. And as a commercial florist, I also have the option to buy things from my suppliers. Now this one is the buried ivy. I'm hoping that I'm going to have lots of this Christmas time to do wreath making classes because it does look fantastic. And what I've done is grouped it together on the opposite side to the section that I put in the front. And really quickly, with just 4 or 5 different types of greenery, I've covered most of my floral foam, apart from this little bit here at the back. Then just underneath where my 2 pumpkins are, I'm going to add some more of this really lovely greenery, brownery, what we're going to call that, just tucked in under there. Now I'm going to pause because I was planning on using this piece, but you can see this one is curved quite nicely to the left, I think it is, as you're looking at it. But for me to put it in the arrangement in the position I was going to do, you're going to end up looking at the back of the foliage. This would suit this side of the arrangement much better. So I'm just going to pop it in here. Really what I'm looking to do is look for greenery that is angled in the position that I want it to go in the arrangement. And in this case, I want something that's got a more tendency to grow towards the right. And that's going to tuck nicely just around where those 2 pumpkins are, so that those pumpkins look like they're part of the display and they haven't been added in as an afterthought. Just slide a few little bits underneath. We'll make that shorter because that's a bit too long. And now it looks like an integral part of the design and not like something's been added in as an afterthought right at the very end. I've also got some pheasant feathers. That was a mouthful and it did take 3 attempts. And I think the colour combination of these works really well. I'm just going to do a little cluster of them. 2, maybe 3, I haven't quite decided. We'll try 2 to start with. 2 little feathers there. Gives it that nice autumnal country sort of style feel, and the colour combination with my container is just brilliant. Now for flowers, I think I've got enough greenery in there. Now it's time for my flowers. I do think I've got enough greenery in the front part of the arrangement, and I'm going to start with a lovely rose. Now I think this variety is Rhodos. But again, I've had a few roses in this week and I'm not 100% sure of the variety. But these are going to come really tall at the back, just in front of that really lovely piece of grass. And I'm going to cluster 2 of them together, almost repeating the same shape as I did with my 2 pheasant feathers and my group of 2 pumpkins there at the bottom. We're so used to being told that you have to arrange in uneven numbers, 3s and 5s and 7s, and that doesn't apply to all types of floral design. Grouping 2 together like that gives you a more modern feel. And just down here at the base, I'm going to introduce some chrysanthemum blooms. Now these are also an amazing colour. It's a really rich reddish brown, and I'm going to tuck 2 of them really in an opposite sort of placement to where the roses were. Now, if you're lucky enough to have access to different types of greenery, then you don't always have to have a huge amount of flowers. If you've got enough greenery to give you a lot of texture and a lot of interest in the design, then 4 flowers in an arrangement can work really well together. If you don't have access to different types of greeneries like I've got in this arrangement, and you still want to be able to create something like this, then think about investing in some foliage that is artificial. You can reuse that time and time again. You could use houseplant foliage, or pop to your florist shop and see what they've got available. And if you can't get all these different types of textures and coloured greenery, just use 1 or 2 that contrasts against one another and gives you a nice interesting colour combination. Now, the flowers I've got in the arrangement so far are a florist grade flower, but I wanted something quite short to tuck in the gap here, and I didn't have anything orange in the studio, so I've gone out and bought myself a supermarket rose. This one is quite a small head, but it always opens up really nicely, and it's a popular one with the ladies that come to do classes here in the studio. It's got a lovely shaped head, and what I'm going to do with these is just sort of tuck them down in a group to one side. If you're lucky enough to have hydrangeas in the garden, this could be a big hydrangea instead. But I'm going to use these lovely roses, and I'm going to put them quite close together so they almost look like one flower head, and that grouped sort of effect gives a little bit more of a modern feel. Now, there's an obvious gap now in front of those roses, so I need to look for some greenery or some textured material to go in that position there. But other than that, I think I'm quite happy with the way this has turned out. You might have noticed that just behind me are some ivy plants, and I think I'm going to cut off a few tendrils just to come down over the front. But before I do that, I'm going to cover my floral foam at the back with some pistache, which is a general sort of fairly inexpensive greenery that florists tend to use. It's great for making hand tides with. As we prepare to go into the autumn, lots of the trees that we see around us are losing their leaves, and there's a lot of contorted hazel or twisted willow available. And I'm going to introduce this really unusual shaped contorted hazel. Now, there's no way am I going to get that into the floral foam because my foam is below the level of the container. So I'm going to have to get myself a wire just to secure that into the foam. But this really opens up the side of the arrangement and gives us what we call negative space. But what I'm going to have to do is wire it into that position there. I'm just going to slide this one out of the way, and then we can see how I can attach that wire. So I've got a florist grade wire. This one is a 71 gauge, so it's not a particularly thick wire. I'm going to put 2 together, take it around the stem there of my contorted hazel, twist so it doesn't move, and I'm going to do that again in a different part of the stem, and then I can use the wire push down into the foam to hold it in position, or at least that's the plan. We'll see how that's going to work out. If I'd have brought the foam above the edge of my container on the side, then I would have been able to secure that in position. What I'm hoping we can do is push those 2 wires down into the foam, and then it'll give me the ability to position that piece of contorted hazel wherever I want it to go. Now, that has worked quite well. I just want to angle it out a little bit more so we can see it more clearly. I'm also going to rest it on the edge of the container and take another set of wires through so that it's holding it from the side. And that, I think, is going to hold it really nicely in position. It's quite firm. Gives that nice bit of open space around the edge of the container, and instead of using the plain green ivy that's just on the shelf behind me, I'm going to use a variegated ivy because I think the colour of this works much nicer alongside that pumpkin. But I am going to have to remove him to find the foam to get that ivy in position. 2 or 3 pieces just tucked in there is going to work really nicely, and then I can pop my little pumpkin back on top. I don't have now that really big sort of gap there at the front that I didn't like in the beginning. Now you might not be able to see from the camera position, but behind the pumpkin here you can see one of the leaves from the chrysanthemums, and it's very dark and it almost makes the design look like it's got a hole in the centre. So what I'm going to do is just use a little bit of the extra greenery there in the centre. It's going to give a bit of texture and draw your eye a little bit away from that very heavy leaf of the chrysanthemum bloom. And I'm going to put 2 pieces in just to cover the centre. Now I can see it because I'm really close to the arrangement. You might not be able to see it from where you're watching, but hopefully that's given you a bit of inspiration on how to create a design for the autumn using lots of different types of greenery that you might be able to forage for, and a simple selection of flowers. Let me know in the comment box if this is something that you would like to make at home, and ask as many questions as you want. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again for another video very soon. Bye for now.